Why would a son murder his parents in cold blood? And who paid him to do it? That's not the beginning of a crime novel. It's not the trailer of a dark Hollywood thriller. It's real. And it happened in the heart of Brentwood, Los Angeles, behind the gates of a $13.5 million estate, drenched in privilege, history, and blood. On a Sunday that was supposed to be ordinary, something unspeakable happened. Rob Reiner, beloved director of Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, and When Harry Met Sally, and his wife Michelle, a brilliant mind in her own right, were found brutally stabbed to death in their home. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The alleged killer? Their own son, Nick Reiner, a 32-year-old screenwriter who lived just steps away in the guest house. A man who, until recently, had been welcomed back into the family fold after years of estrangement. But here's where the story tears the script apart. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't just a family fight gone too far. This was paid for. And what Rob's best friend, Billy Crystal, just revealed, shatters the image of a grieving family and suggests something much darker was at play. The curious case of Hollywood's golden son. Let's start with the contradiction. Rob Reiner was Hollywood royalty, the son of Carl Reiner, the golden boy of both comedy and drama. He wasn't just a director, he was the director. He made legends out of scripts. He was known for loyalty, generosity, and building bridges, not burning them. So how does someone like that end up betrayed by his own blood? And if Nick was the killer, what pushed him over the edge? Or maybe the better question is, who? Billy Crystal speaks out. The world hadn't heard from Billy Crystal in weeks. Not a tweet, not a quote, not a sound. Then, out of nowhere, a sit-down interview. Raw, unscripted, and nothing like his usual polished public persona. Eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. He said it plainly. Someone paid Nick. He didn't speculate. He didn't hedge. He knew. And the moment he said it, everything changed. Theories exploded. Journalists scrambled. Investigators, who until that moment were treating this as a tragic but open and shut case, now had a new directive. Find the money. Follow the motive. Because this wasn't just a broken family. This was a murder for hire. The family with too many secrets. Romy Reiner, Rob and Michelle's 27-year-old daughter, had made the 911 call. She wasn't supposed to be there that morning. She arrived early to borrow her mother's scarf for a red carpet event. Instead, she walked in on a nightmare. 2 lifeless bodies. A trail of blood. A silence that screamed. But her first words to the 911 operator weren't what you'd expect. She didn't say, "My parents have been killed." She didn't say, "Help." She said, "It's him. He finally did it." Who was she talking about? That's what sent chills down investigators' spines. And it's what led them to the guest house. Nick's murky history. Nick Reiner isn't your typical Hollywood kid. He's battled addiction, in and out of rehab by the age of 20. He co-wrote a semi-autobiographical film about his demons called Being Charlie. It was supposed to be a redemption arc. But behind the scenes, Nick had cut ties with his father for years. There were rumors of shouting matches, restraining orders, ultimatums. When he moved back onto the estate, it was said to be a reconciliation, a fresh start. Now, it looks more like a trapdoor waiting to be sprung. Because according to police, the murder weapon, a chef's knife missing from the Reiner kitchen, was found buried in the garden behind Nick's guest house. And DNA? Matched. His. He owed someone. But a knife alone doesn't explain the why. That's where Billy Crystal comes in. In his interview, he mentioned a conversation, weeks before the murders. He and Rob were on the patio, sipping whiskey. Rob seemed distant, distracted. When Billy asked if something was wrong, Rob shook his head and said one sentence. "Nick's in trouble again. And this time, it's not just drugs." No details, no names. But Billy remembers the way he said it, like someone already preparing for loss. So he reached out to Nick a few days later. Texted. Called. Eventually, Nick replied. 3 words. He knows everything. Teasing the secret. What did Rob know? What was Nick hiding? Was someone blackmailing him? Or, and here's where it gets truly sinister, was someone blackmailing Rob through his son? Because shortly after Rob's death, multiple media outlets received anonymous messages. Most were noise. Internet chaos. But one tip stood out. It read, "Check offshore account. Belize. Sent 3 days before deaths." Not from Nick. Payment ID ends in 0911. It was a job. The source? Still unknown. But the FBI confirmed the wire transfer exists. $250,000. Laundered. Untraceable origin. Destination? A fake production company registered in Nick Reiner's name. The diary, the drive, and the shadow man. In the chaos following the murders, Romy reportedly turned over a flash drive to police. Not just photos or family videos. Documents. PDFs, audio recordings. Some of the files were labeled Dad's Insurance. One audio clip was particularly haunting. It was Rob talking to someone on speakerphone. He says, "I won't let you do this to her. If you want something, come for me, not Michelle. And leave the kids out of it." Who is he talking to? And what could be so dangerous that Rob Reiner, a man who shaped the stories of generations, was trembling? Hollywood's dark underbelly. This story isn't just about one murder. It's about something far deeper. It's about what happens when power, fame, and fear collide. It's about what Hollywood does to the families of its icons. And it's about what one man knew that he was never supposed to reveal. Because the whispers are growing louder. The files are starting to leak. And Billy Crystal? He's not staying silent anymore. He's done protecting the image. He's ready to expose the machine. But what Billy Crystal reveals in Chapter 1 will flip the entire story upside down. And no one, not even the FBI, saw it coming. She stepped into the foyer and saw the blood trail. What do you do when the house you grew up in becomes a crime scene? When the voices that raised you fall silent, not because they're gone on vacation, but because they're lying dead on the kitchen floor. What happens when you're the one who finds them? Romy Reiner didn't knock. Why would she? This was her childhood home. The place with the creaky floorboard outside her old bedroom, the hallway with the family photos, the always slightly too warm scent of vanilla and wood polish. It was supposed to be quick. She'd left her dress in the car. She was just coming in to grab a scarf from her mom's closet, the one with the embroidered corners Michelle had picked up in Venice 2 summers ago. It matched the neckline perfectly, but when she walked in, something felt wrong. Stillness. That thick, unbreathable stillness you feel in hospital rooms and abandoned churches. No sound. No smell of coffee or scrambled eggs. "No, Romy, you startled me," from her mom. Just air. And blood. The discovery. The first thing she saw wasn't a body. It was a trail. A thick, uneven line of deep red that started in the hallway and disappeared into the kitchen. At first, she didn't believe it. Maybe her dad spilled something. Maybe someone broke a glass of red wine. Maybe. Then she turned the corner and screamed. 2 bodies. One curled on the floor near the kitchen island, face down, hands stiff, a single slipper still on her foot. The other, slumped against the far counter, legs twisted unnaturally, a large wound visible even at a glance. It was Rob, his eyes still open, his mouth slightly agape, as if he'd been mid-sentence. No struggle, no signs of a break-in, no sign of forced entry. The 911 call. Let's be clear, Romy's call wasn't calm. It wasn't coherent, but one part of it pierced through the dispatcher's recording like a bullet. It's him. He finally did it. And then, silence. Then sobbing. The dispatcher tried to guide her. "Ma'am, who is it? Who's hurt?" Romy didn't say my parents. She said, "Check the guest house. He's there. He's always there." The responding officers arrived within 6 minutes. And Romy? She was still crouched on the floor, cradling her mother's wrist, whispering the same line over and over. "I told you we should have moved her out. I told you." The walkthrough. When police entered the main house, they quickly confirmed 2 fatalities. Rob Reiner, 78. Multiple stab wounds. No defensive injuries. Michelle Reiner, 70. 1 major wound to the abdomen. 1 to the neck. Estimated time of death? Between 3 o'clock and 5:30 a.m. No signs of robbery. No missing valuables. And the back door? Unlocked. But the security system hadn't gone off. Why? Because the only people who had the code were Rob, Michelle, Romy, and Nick. The guest house confrontation. By the time police knocked on the guest house door, backup had already arrived. Guns drawn. Tactical positions. One officer later described it like this. "I thought we were going to find a man hiding under a bed or running out the back door. Instead, he opened the door like nothing happened, like we were bothering him." Nick Reiner answered the door barefoot, in sweatpants, shirtless. Groggy. Red-eyed. slurring slightly, claimed he'd been asleep, said he didn't hear anything. Officers noticed dried blood on his left forearm. He said it was a scratch from shaving. At 5 a.m., they found a change of clothes in his bathroom sink, soaked, with faint traces of blood, later confirmed to be both Rob and Michelle's DNA. A knife was missing from the main kitchen block. It was found 2 hours later, buried beneath mulch outside the guest house window. Something didn't add up. Nick was arrested on the spot. He didn't resist, didn't ask why, didn't cry. Just one sentence as they handcuffed him. "You should ask who paid me." They did. But he never answered again. Lawyered up immediately. Refused questioning. And just like that, the narrative flipped. This wasn't just a tragic family murder. This was a transaction. Inside the crime scene. What makes this story so chilling, even more than the brutality of the murders, is the eerie order of it all. There were no signs of rage. No overturned furniture. No broken glass. Michelle was making tea. That's what investigators think. Rob was likely sitting at the kitchen counter, reading his morning brief or reviewing script notes. Then, a figure enters the room. One knife. Two victims. Swift. Quiet. Efficient. Rob had always said if he ever got killed in a movie, he'd want it to be dramatic. Maybe a rooftop gunfight or a slow-motion explosion. But this was silent. Calculated. And personal. Billy Crystal arrives. Word spread fast in Brentwood. When Billy Crystal arrived, less than 2 hours after the news broke, he wasn't stopped by police. He was escorted in. Why? Because Billy wasn't just a friend. He was family. Their bond went back decades. They shared credits, birthdays, anniversaries, trauma, and now grief. When he saw Rob's body, he didn't speak for nearly 2 minutes. Then he whispered. He knew it was coming. The unseen camera. Here's where the story begins to fracture. What the public didn't know, until days later, is that Michelle had installed a new security system just 2 weeks prior. Specifically, a discrete camera facing the entrance from the guest house. Not part of the main system. Not visible. Hidden inside a ceramic planter. It recorded movement between 3:41 a.m. and 3:45 a.m. A figure, male, barefoot, wearing a hoodie, carrying something long in his hand, entering the main house. Then exiting 14 minutes later. That footage was recovered, barely. The file had been manually deleted, but forensic techs restored it from the device's internal cache. The timestamp was crucial, because Nick's phone pinged to the guest house Wi-Fi at exactly 3:40 a.m. Then again at 4:02 a.m., meaning he was not asleep, and someone tried to delete the evidence. The death pose. There's another chilling detail. When Rob's body was examined, investigators noted his hands were curled inward, almost clasping. In one fist, clutched tightly, was a torn piece of paper. From a notepad, with a name written on it. It wasn't Nick's. It wasn't Romy's. It wasn't anyone in the Reiner family. It simply read, "Ask Levy. He knows." Who's Levy? That question would send shockwaves through Hollywood just weeks later. But back then, it only deepened the mystery. The missing files. Rob Reiner was meticulous. He kept all his personal notes in a locked wooden filing cabinet in his office. One that required both a key and a 4-digit code. When police searched it, every file was intact, except one folder, labeled Indigo 95. Gone. Removed cleanly. No signs of forced entry. No scratches on the lock. Just missing. Indigo. A project? A company? A person? No one knows. Yet, closing in. By now, public opinion was split. Some believed Nick had snapped. Others, especially within Hollywood's inner circles, whispered about something darker. Too much precision. Too clean. And the phrase that kept coming up? He wasn't smart enough to pull this off alone. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Because when Nick's ex-girlfriend came forward with a voicemail he left her 2 nights before the murder, it wasn't an apology. It was a confession, and it named names. The troubled son of a Hollywood legend, but no one saw this coming. Or did they? They called him Hollywood royalty. But Nick Reiner never wore the crown. He didn't direct box office hits. He didn't walk red carpets like his father or charm late-night audiences like his grandfather Carl. Instead, Nick's name was often whispered behind closed doors, usually with a sigh, a shrug, or a "poor Rob, he's tried everything." But here's the question no one dared to ask. What if the golden boy of one of Hollywood's most celebrated dynasties was always destined to implode? Or worse, what if someone helped him do it? A silver spoon, laced with poison. Nick was born into privilege. Mansions, premiers, private schools, housekeepers, chefs, tutors. But from a young age, he wasn't the bubbly, spotlight-loving child people expected. He was distant, sensitive, quick to anger, easily overwhelmed. Rob and Michelle, known for their warmth and patience, reportedly did everything to help him. Therapists, summer programs, mindfulness retreats, medications. But by the time Nick was 15, he had a reputation. Not for brilliance, not for kindness, but for meltdowns. And more importantly, disappearances. The vanishing years. Between 17 and 24, Nick seemed to vanish from public life. No college enrollment, no social media, no red carpet sightings. Where was he? Sources say Nick was in and out of rehab. At one point, he was even reportedly admitted to an intensive inpatient center in Utah under an alias, far away from LA's paparazzi and celebrity rehab mills. And what was he battling? Everything. According to someone who shared group therapy with him in 2013, Nick wasn't just another spoiled rich kid. He was haunted. You could see it in his eyes. He hated the name Reiner. He said it like it was poison. Being Charlie, the cry for help. In 2015, Nick re-emerged. Not in tabloids, but in Hollywood's indie film scene. He co-wrote Being Charlie, a deeply personal film about a 17-year-old addict struggling against the weight of his famous family, expectations, and self-loathing. And who directed it? Rob Reiner. It was, at first glance, a father-son healing project, an artistic olive branch. But dig a little deeper, and you'll see something darker. There's a scene in the film where the main character yells, "You love the idea of me, Dad. But you've never loved me." It wasn't just dialogue. It was autobiography. Critics praised the honesty but noted the rawness felt too real. One reviewer said, "It's not a movie. It's a therapy session no one should have filmed." The missing interviews. When the film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, Rob did most of the press. Nick? Silent. In fact, multiple scheduled interviews were canceled. Insiders claim Rob had to step in last minute more than once. Why? Nick reportedly had panic attacks backstage. One photographer recalled, he looked like he was being led to an execution. And behind the scenes, Nick clashed with producers, snapped at publicists, isolated himself. One assistant said he didn't want to be there, not because he was shy, but because he hated what the movie revealed about him. A growing obsession. After Being Charlie, Nick dropped off the radar again. But this time, not into rehab. Into dark corners of the internet. Investigators discovered Nick had several alternate Reddit accounts, some posting in forums about conspiracy theories, Hollywood corruption, and most notably, paternity fraud and family betrayal. He posted about feeling like an imposter in his own home, about being monitored. One account even claimed, "My dad knows what they did. I found the papers. It's not what he thinks." What papers? That's unclear. But investigators are now scouring Nick's digital footprint for any mention of the mysterious Indigo 95 folder that went missing after the murders. Could it be connected? Could Nick have stumbled onto something that made him feel like everything was a lie? Friends who disappeared. Before his arrest, Nick didn't have many close friends. But the few who stuck around paint a picture that's hard to ignore. One college roommate, who asked not to be named, said, "Nick was funny, smart. But there was something off. He'd get really dark at night. He'd say stuff like, 'They'd be better off without me,' or 'maybe I'd be better off without them.'" Others mentioned paranoia. One former writing partner said Nick believed someone was reading his emails, even breaking into his cloud storage. And that wasn't just delusion. Because just days after the murders, a Google Drive account tied to Nick was accessed remotely from a location in New Mexico. Nick hadn't been to New Mexico in over a year. So who logged in? And what were they looking for? Financial trouble. With a twist. Despite his family's fortune, Nick never had full access to it. According to court documents tied to a 2020 civil suit, Rob and Michelle placed Nick's inheritance and trust in a protective conservatorship, meaning his access was restricted due to past issues with addiction and erratic behavior. That didn't sit well with Nick. Friends said he often raged about feeling controlled, trapped, and infantilized. And here's where it gets strange. 4 months before the murders, Nick received a $250,000 wire transfer. Not from the Reiners, not from any known associate, but from a company called Pelion North Media, listed as a script development consultancy in the UK. Except it doesn't exist. The address is fake. The website is defunct. The tax ID? Registered to an electronics repair shop in Queens. Was it a shell? A front? Why would someone send Nick that kind of money? And why was it flagged 2 weeks later by the IRS, then quickly deflagged with no further investigation? Unless someone wanted it buried. The ex-girlfriend's voicemail. And then, the twist. A woman named Tessa Levenstein, a former model and part-time actress, contacted police. She dated Nick for 7 months in 2022. The relationship ended badly. Blocked numbers, legal threats, emotional whiplash. But days before the murders, Tessa received a voicemail from Nick. She didn't listen to it at first, deleted it even. But when the news broke about the Reiners, she recovered it from her cloud. And what it said shocked her. Nick's voice was shaky, quiet, almost whispering. If something happens, it wasn't my idea. But I can't stop it now. I'm in too deep. Just remember I tried. Then a long pause. And finally, they said if I didn't do it, they'd make sure I disappeared. Who were they? What couldn't he stop? The FBI connection. Here's where federal authorities got involved. The wording in Nick's voicemail mirrored language found in a previous federal investigation tied to a powerful Hollywood fixer, someone known for making things go away. Same phrase. If you don't do it, you disappear. The implication? Coercion, blackmail, or worse, a hit arranged under duress. And suddenly, the image of Nick as a cold-blooded killer started to crack. What if he wasn't the architect of this nightmare? What if he was the pawn? A pawn with blood on his hands, but a gun to his head? The Levy connection. Remember that note clutched in Rob's hand? Ask Levy. He knows. Turns out, Nick mentioned a Levy in a series of text messages to Tessa months earlier. He wrote, "Levy says it's the only way to get free." Another message. Levy has dirt on everyone, even Dad. The name Levy doesn't appear in any known Reiner family circle. But FBI sources are now investigating a man named Jonas Levy, a fixer known for brokering NDAs, silencing scandals, and allegedly cleaning up dangerous Hollywood messes. He disappeared from public life in 2019 after being tied to multiple defamation cases involving high-profile producers. No one has seen or heard from him since. Until now. A fragile monster? So, who is Nick Reiner? A spoiled, broken rich kid with blood on his hands? A vengeful son exacting a final blow against parents who tried to protect him from himself? Or a puppet? Someone manipulated, controlled, pushed to do the unthinkable with promises of money, freedom, or silence? Because as the investigation unfolds, one thing becomes clear. Nick wasn't acting alone, and someone, perhaps multiple someones, wanted Rob and Michelle gone. But why? What were they afraid Rob would reveal? What did Nick find that made him so dangerous? And who was pulling his strings? Because what Rob's widow left behind in one encrypted file, and what Romy Reiner uncovered in a long-forgotten laptop, will finally expose the name behind the money and the motive. They were Hollywood royalty, adored, respected, untouchable. So why would anyone want them dead? Every Hollywood story has two versions. The one the cameras show, and the one buried behind velvet curtains, NDA clauses, and strange champagne smiles. To the world, Rob and Michelle Reiner were the gold standard, a power couple who defied the odds. Decades of marriage. No scandals, no divorces, no rehab stints. Just success, love, and legacy. But beneath the glitz was a truth much darker. Because someone, or something, wanted them gone. And the motive? It wasn't fame or fortune. It was secrets. Secrets so deep they couldn't be hidden by security gates or box office records. A fairy tale that fooled everyone. Rob met Michelle Singer in 1987. He was already a household name. The genius behind this is Spinal Tap and Stand By Me. She was a photographer, fiercely intelligent, a quiet creative who hated the spotlight. They married a year later, and for 35 years stayed together, a rarity in the fickle, fame-soaked world of Hollywood. They didn't just survive the industry. They mastered it. They were fixtures at galas, festivals, charity events. but always just on the edges, never flaunting, never indulging. They were respected, safe, loved. But sometimes, the safest couples hide the darkest truths. Michelle's diary. Something is off. After the murders, investigators found a series of personal journals Michelle had kept for over 2 decades. Most entries were mundane, travel notes, quotes from books, grocery lists. But in the last 6 months, the tone shifted. One entry, dated just 3 weeks before her death, read, "I think he's being watched again." The calls, the clicks, the emails bouncing back. And Nick. Something changed in his eyes. "I don't feel safe in my own house." Another, "Rob won't talk about it. He says it's nothing, but he triple-locked the office last night." And this one, dated 5 days before the murders. Romy says she heard footsteps in the hallway around 3 a.m. "I told her it was Nick. She said Nick was outside talking to someone. We're not crazy. We're being watched." Who was watching them? And why? A final dinner and a strange conversation. 2 nights before the murder, Rob and Michelle had dinner with Billy Crystal. It was casual, or so Billy thought. Thai food, a bottle of Cabernet. But Rob seemed distracted. Half there. Billy told investigators that Rob kept glancing toward the hallway, as if he expected someone to appear. Mid-conversation, Rob said something strange. "You ever think about how fast everything can go away?" Billy laughed it off. But Rob didn't. He just said, "It's not just movies anymore, Billy. Real stories are getting people killed." The safe that wouldn't open. There was one item in the house police couldn't access right away, a reinforced safe in Rob's study. It wasn't digital. It wasn't simple. It was custom-built, with biometric locks. Only Rob and Michelle had access. When they finally cracked it, with a specialized team flown in from Sacramento, they found documents. Dozens of them. Contracts, scripts, legal letters, and a thick manila envelope labeled, "Do not open unless dead." Inside, a handwritten letter. Not a will. Not a suicide note. A warning. The letter's content. Here's a partial excerpt from the letter, confirmed by FBI sources. "If you're reading this, I'm dead. It wasn't an accident. And it wasn't my son's idea. He was forced, manipulated, blackmailed. The people behind this want me silenced. Because I know what they did. In 1995, in New Mexico, it involves children, celebrities, executives. I tried to bury it. But I couldn't live with the guilt. The name you're looking for is Levy. He's the fixer. He knows who paid for it. And if Romy finds this, tell her I'm sorry I didn't tell her everything. I was trying to protect her." Romy's fragmented memories. Romy had always been close to her parents, especially her mother. But in the weeks leading up to the murder, she noticed shifts. Her father kept locking the study. Her mother checked the windows 3 times a night. And then there were the visitors. Late-night guests Nick would meet outside the guest house. Men in hoodies. Faces she didn't recognize. Foreign license plates. Once, she saw Rob watching from the upstairs window, his face pale, his hands shaking. She asked him if he knew who they were. He said, "They're ghosts. From a script I never finished." But they weren't fiction. They were real. And they were getting closer. Hollywood connections that went sour. Rob had friends in high places. But also enemies. Not everyone loved how outspoken he was, especially in recent years. He had been working on a documentary titled Under the Real, an expose on the history of Hollywood's silent scandals. The project had no public announcement, no press, but sources say it involved leaked testimonies, NDAs, and victim interviews from decades past. And guess who was reportedly helping him produce it? Michelle. She handled the sourcing. She coordinated meetings. She tracked down whistleblowers. One of them even wrote to her, "If anything happens to me, you know who to tell." That person vanished 6 months ago. A phone call lost in static. The night before the murders, Rob made a phone call. To Billy? No. To a number traced back to a burner phone. The call lasted 43 seconds. The only word that came through clearly? Levy. The rest was static. Intercepted? Scrambled? Or purposely altered? We may never know. But one thing is certain. Rob knew something he wasn't supposed to. And he wasn't willing to take it to the grave quietly. Why Michelle was targeted? Some say Rob was the primary target. But those who knew Michelle say that's wrong. She was the researcher, the archivist, the collector of secrets. One former assistant said, "Michelle had a box. She called it the vault. I asked what it was once. She said, "Truth. The kind that makes people disappear." The vault was found under her side of the bed. Inside were external hard drives, Polaroids, scanned court documents, audio files, one DVD labeled Indigo Footage, 1995. That DVD? Still being examined by federal agents. But early leaks suggest it may involve underage actors, powerful producers, and a cover-up that goes back 30 years. If true, it would explain everything. A house divided. There's another theory investigators are quietly exploring. What if someone inside the house knew? What if the pressure, the secrets, were tearing the Reiners apart? Romy has hinted in interviews that her parents were fighting more than usual, that Rob was considering going public. But Michelle wanted to wait. She wanted protection, lawyers, deals, insurance. Rob? He wanted to burn it all down. In one private email to a former studio head, Rob wrote, "I'm done playing nice. They buried kids to protect kings. It's time someone lights a match." A legacy wiped out. Rob and Michelle weren't just victims. They were warnings. Warnings of what happens when the powerful speak out. Warnings of what's buried behind success, applause, and red carpet smiles. They raised a family, built careers, changed lives, and they died for it. At the hands of their own son? Maybe. But as Romy said in her first press statement, this wasn't a family tragedy. It was a message. A very loud, bloody message. But what the security cameras captured in the 14 minutes between the murders, and what the audio picked up from the living room Alexa, would blow this case wide open. The camera was hidden in a flower pot. The footage was deleted. But when investigators recovered it, what they saw changed everything. At first glance, it looked like just another luxury guest house. Spanish tile roof, cream stucco walls, modern finishes, tucked quietly behind the main mansion at the far end of the Brentwood estate. To the public, it was a sweet gesture. Rob and Michelle letting their son move back in, giving him space, a second chance to rebuild his life. But to those who really knew the Reiners, it was a compromise, a silent negotiation. Let him stay, but let's keep eyes on him. Because there was something about Nick that unnerved Michelle in those final months. And what she did in secret, what she installed, would reveal more than anyone expected. A mother's paranoia, or premonition. 3 weeks before the murder, Michelle Reiner made an unannounced call to a private security firm in Encino. She requested 2 things. A full surveillance assessment of their property, discreet external monitoring of the guest house entrance. She was specific. No flashy alarms. No beeping motion detectors. Just quiet awareness. She paid in cash. Used a middleman. Didn't tell Rob. Didn't tell Romy. And definitely didn't tell Nick. One former technician later told investigators. She kept saying, "I'm probably overreacting. He's just been different lately." Then she paused and added, "But I can't afford to be wrong." The hidden flower pot. The firm installed a micro HD camera in a ceramic flower pot by the guest house door. It wasn't connected to the main security system. That system could be accessed by Nick, and, investigators later discovered, had been disabled multiple times in the weeks leading up to the murders. But this camera? It was local only. Battery-powered. Internal memory. Encrypted. It had a simple job. Record any motion between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. That's it. Nothing fancy. Just eyes in the dark. Deleted, or so they thought. After the murders, detectives swept the property. They cataloged over 70 surveillance devices between the main house and guest house, but almost all were offline, disabled, or conveniently malfunctioning. Except the flower pot. It wasn't in the system. It wasn't obvious. It was discovered by accident, when an officer knocked it over while photographing the patio. The camera was damaged. Waterlogged. When they checked the memory. Empty. Deleted. Manually. But that's the thing about technology. It remembers. Digital resurrection. The LAPD cyber forensics team couldn't recover the files. But the FBI could. Using deep data extraction, they accessed a hidden cache of residual frames. It took 48 hours. Frame by frame, they rebuilt the video. And what emerged? A sequence of events that rewrote the narrative. The timestamp, 3:41 a.m. It begins with silence. Then, at 3:41 a.m., a figure steps into frame. Tall. Male. Hoodie pulled low. Barefoot. He pauses. Looks around. Reaches into his hoodie. and pulls out a kitchen knife, long serrated. He holds it loosely, like someone holding a pencil. Then, without hesitation, he walks toward the main house. The entire clip lasts 26 seconds. But those seconds? They're devastating. Because while the hoodie obscures most of his face, it doesn't hide his left wrist. And on that wrist is a distinctive tattoo, a quote Rob Reiner once shared in a 1998 interview. "Life is short. Art is forever." Nick had it inked on his wrist on his 18th birthday, a matching one with his father. But then, another shadow. This is where it gets strange. 3:54 a.m. 13 minutes after the figure disappears into the main house. Another figure appears. Shorter, bulkier, wearing all black. They approach the guest house, but don't knock. Instead, they reach beneath the flower pot, where the camera is. They touch it, pause, then turn and look directly into the lens. Just for a moment, enough for a partial facial capture. And then, black. Footage ends. 2 people, 2 timestamps, 1 night. So now the timeline is no longer a question of if. It's a question of who the second person was, and why they weren't mentioned in Nick's story. Because during his brief time in custody, Nick never said another person was involved. He said, "They told me what to do." Not, "We did it." The enhanced audio. But there's another layer. The camera didn't just record video. It had a built-in omnidirectional mic. And while most of the audio was environmental, crickets, wind, the occasional distant siren, there was one sound at 3:46 a.m. A voice, male, near the camera, whispering, just 3 words. He agreed already. FBI analysts confirmed the voice was not Nick's, which means someone else was on site, someone giving instructions, and someone ensuring the job was done. Who was the accomplice? Here's where it gets terrifying. Using facial reconstruction tech and gait analysis, experts attempted to identify the second figure. No conclusive match, but the posture, proportions, and movement resembled someone already known to the investigation. A man named Jonas Levy. That's right, the same Levy Rob wrote about. The same fixer tied to multiple scandals, and long suspected of involvement in high-profile cover-ups. Problem? Jonas Levy has been missing for 6 years. No official address. No online presence. Some claim he fled the country. Others believe he's dead. But that face, that frame, that momentary glance into the camera, it could be him. And if it is, then this wasn't just a son killing his parents. It was a coordinated hit. A note from Michelle. In the flower pot, tucked beneath the camera's base, officers found a folded scrap of paper. Faded. Water-damaged. On it, Michelle had scrawled something in pencil. "If this gets found, don't believe the story. Check the footage. It's not just Nick. Please protect Romy." She knew. She knew something was coming. And even in her last precautions, she tried to leave a message. A breadcrumb. A mother's final warning. The guest house itself. Investigators did a full sweep of Nick's space. Here's what they found. Burned documents in the fireplace. Ashes recovered, but mostly unreadable. A USB drive hidden inside a vent, encrypted, currently being analyzed. A list of names pinned behind a bathroom mirror, handwritten, including Romy, Billy Crystal, and 2 major Hollywood producers. A single page from a script titled Indigo. Opening scene describes a private estate, a guest house, and a murder, eerily similar to real events. Was it fiction? Or a confession disguised as art? The investigator's dilemma. At this point, the evidence was damning, but incomplete. Nick was clearly involved, but so was someone else. And the motive? Still murky. Money? Silence? Revenge? One detective close to the case said, "This isn't just about who did it. It's about who ordered it and why." Because the footage, the voices, the strange black-clad figure, they point to a conspiracy, not a spontaneous act, not a breakdown, but a scripted execution. And the director? Still hiding in the shadows. But what federal agents found next, on a listening device in the Reiner's living room, captured a conversation just moments before the murders, and revealed that Rob wasn't afraid. He was ready to fight. He hesitated, then whispered, "I told him not to take the money." It had been 17 days since the murders. 17 days of silence. 17 days of candlelit vigils, front-page headlines, fan theories, and conspiracy spirals. And not a single word from the man who knew Rob Reiner better than anyone alive. Until now. Billy Crystal, the icon of comedy. The man who made millions laugh, cry, and believe in love stories that started with sarcasm, sat down in front of a camera, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. No script, no publicist, no teleprompter, just truth, or at least the version of it he could live with. The backstory: brothers without blood. Billy and Rob weren't just friends. They were brothers, not by DNA, but by time, trust, and trenches. They'd co-hosted fundraisers, fought studio execs, shared stories of their kids, and clinked glasses after every premiere. Billy was Rob's best man in his second wedding. Rob had once joked, "If I ever get hit by a bus, make sure Billy's the one who roasts me." Billy had replied, "Only if you make sure I get final cut." And now? Now Billy was sitting alone. No roast. No laughter. Only grief. And guilt. The interview. "I'm not here to entertain." The setting was intentionally bare. One chair. One light. One camera. Billy cleared his throat. Paused. Then spoke. "I've waited to say anything because I wasn't sure if I should. Or even if I could." Another pause. His hands clenched tightly. "But I can't keep quiet anymore. Not when people are saying this was just about Nick, just a drugged-up son gone crazy. That's not the whole story." Then he looked directly into the camera. "Because someone paid Nick. And I told him not to take the money." A strange encounter. Billy described a phone call he received 2 months before the murder. It was 2:23 a.m. Nick, slurring, angry, paranoid. He said, "I'm done being broke. I'm done being told what I can and can't say. There's someone who's offering me a way out." Billy was confused. He asked, "What kind of way out?" Nick responded, "A job, a script, a big one, but it comes with strings." When Billy asked who was offering it, Nick only said one name: Levy. The warning. Billy didn't wait. The next morning, he called Rob. Explained everything. Rob didn't react the way Billy expected. He didn't panic. He just sighed. Long, heavy. Then he said, "He found it, didn't he?" Billy asked, "Found what?" But Rob wouldn't say. Only this: if they made him an offer, it's because they know what he has. And if they know, it's too late. Billy begged him to go to the police. To leave the house. To take Romy. To disappear. Rob's response: "I've spent my life telling stories that made people feel brave. I won't die a coward." The day it happened, Billy was scheduled to have lunch with Rob the day of the murders. They were going to meet at a diner they both loved, the same place where they used to write jokes on napkins back in the 80s. Rob never showed. Billy called. No answer. He sent a text. "You okay?" It went green. Half an hour later, Romy called. Screaming. Sobbing. And all Billy could do was drop the phone and fall to his knees in his kitchen. Billy's private visit. 3 days after the crime scene was cleared, Billy was granted access to the estate. Romy met him at the gate. She handed him something before he even stepped inside. A sealed envelope. On the front, in Rob's handwriting: "For Billy, if it goes bad." Inside, a flash drive. And a note. "It's all here. Indigo. Levy. The tapes. The bribes. You always said you wanted to do something that matters. Well, here's your shot." Billy hasn't revealed what's on the drive. Not yet. But during the interview, he said, "If the FBI doesn't move on it by the end of the year, I will. Publicly. On every platform I can find." An emotional collapse. Halfway through the interview, Billy broke down. Not a single tear, but full collapse. He stared off, then whispered, "He begged me to protect Romy. He said, if they can't get to me, they'll go for her. They always go for the ones who know the least." He paused again, then said, "And now, she's the last Reiner standing." The conversation that haunts him. Billy recalled a final phone call with Rob, just 3 days before the murders. Rob was cryptic. He kept referring to indigo, something from the past, something buried, something tied to an event in 1995 that never made headlines, but should have. Billy pressed him. Rob said, "I have evidence. Video. Documents. Witnesses." And then, something chilling: "They let me live because I stayed quiet. But once Nick found the box, it was over." Billy asked, "What box?" Rob replied, "The one Michelle kept hidden. The one labeled Vault." Billy never got the chance to ask more. The call ended abruptly. And now? The answers are scattered across encrypted hard drives, court-sealed folders, and a trail of lies deep enough to choke the truth itself. Who was Levy? Billy didn't mince words. He believes Jonas Levy is still alive. He believes he was on the property the night of the murders. And he believes Levy orchestrated the entire thing, using Nick as the weapon. You think Hollywood doesn't have hitmen? You think just because people wear tuxedos they don't bury bodies? Think again. Billy claimed Levy was once hired to make a different actor's overdose disappear, that he was known to erase scandals, to sanitize messes. But this wasn't cleanup. This was erasure, a full wipe, of the man who knew too much, and the woman who helped him gather it. The moment that shocked investigators. Toward the end of the interview, Billy was asked directly, "Do you think Nick pulled the trigger?" He looked off. Long silence. Then answered, "I think Nick held the knife. But I don't think he was holding it for himself." The interviewer asked, "Then who was he holding it for?" Billy whispered, "Whoever promised him freedom." A final message to Hollywood. Before the cameras cut, Billy addressed the industry. "You know what this was. You all know. Stop pretending you don't." He called on producers, directors, executives, people who'd worked with Rob, dined with Michelle, smiled beside them at galas, to come forward. If you don't speak up now, you're complicit. You're not just cowards, you're accessories. He stood, walked off camera, and left the room silent, the way Rob's house had been that morning. Before the blood, before the cover-up, before the silence. But the next clue wouldn't come from Billy. It would come from the money, because someone had wired Nick $250,000, and the source? Hidden in plain sight, behind a fake screenplay deal and a Hollywood name no one expected. $250,000. Wired. Hidden. Clean. But when investigators pulled back the curtain, the name behind the money shocked everyone in Hollywood. Every crime has a cost. Some are emotional. Some are physical. But the cleanest crimes, the ones that are meant to vanish without a trace, are paid for in cash. Unmarked. Laundered. Layered. Hidden. That's how this one started. The Reiner murders weren't just fueled by secrets. They were financed by a ghost. And now, that ghost had a name. The initial clue. A half-deleted statement. 3 days after the murders, FBI forensic analysts began combing through Nick Reiner's personal laptop. Encrypted, password-protected, cluttered with screenwriting drafts, music downloads, and junk folders. But deep in the system cache was something strange. A deleted PDF, recovered from a temporary files folder. Title? W9 Payment Agreement. Pelion North Media. That name again. Pelion North Media. The fake UK-based script development company we mentioned earlier. According to the document, Nick had been commissioned for a conceptual screenplay project involving themes of generational trauma and creative suppression. The payment? $250,000, split into 2 wire transfers. One scheduled before the project, one after completion. But here's the problem. There was no script, no outline, no paper trail. And the project manager listed on the agreement? Jonathan S. Levy. A name now permanently burned into the center of the investigation. Unpacking Pelion North Media. The FBI moved fast. They traced the Pelion North Media address to a rundown building in Camden, London, a former dry cleaners now listed as permanently closed. The UK government had no active registration for Pelion North Media. The website URL led to a 404. But a WHOIS lookup of the domain history revealed it had been purchased anonymously 6 months prior, through a proxy server in Thailand. The kicker? The only piece of active metadata left on the invoice document was a Microsoft Word user tag. The username? Gr Hardwick. Not Levy. Not Nick. Someone else. Someone hiding deeper. I don't remember writing this. Nick's defense attorney was questioned about the W9 agreement. His official comment? My client does not recall authoring, signing, or negotiating this contract. That would seem ridiculous, if not for one unsettling fact. Nick's signature on the PDF was digitally forged. A handwriting analysis expert confirmed it. His past signatures, from lease agreements, prescriptions, even birthday cards, didn't match. The W9 was fake. The deal never existed. But the money did. Follow the money. Wire transfer number 1. Using subpoena power and financial intel, the Bureau tracked down the wire. The first transfer, $125,000, was sent to Nick's trust account 2 months before the murders. The sender? An LLC titled Harborview Content Partners. On the surface, it appeared legitimate. Based in Delaware. Listed under Creative Investment Portfolio Services. But when investigators peeled back the corporate layers, they found Harborview's sole executive was a woman named Eliza Corvin, a former assistant at Universal Studios, terminated in 2016. The bank account associated with Harborview had only received 2 incoming payments in the past year. One from a film distribution firm in Czechia. The other, $850,000, from a trust account connected to a former studio CEO. Name redacted. But sources say the person is known to have previous ties to Jonas Levy. The second payment never came. The second half of the $250,000 was scheduled for release on September 4, 2025. The murders occurred August 31st. In other words, Nick never made it to the finish line because someone or something triggered the kill switch early. Why? Some theories say Nick got cold feet. Others believe Rob discovered the plan and confronted his son. There's even speculation that someone, perhaps Rob himself, accessed the burner laptop where the contract was stored and deleted the evidence. But they didn't delete it fast enough, because the money trail was already printed. The hand OFF. One piece of evidence stunned investigators. Nick's Venmo history. You'd think someone involved in a murder for hire wouldn't use Venmo. But in March 2025, Nick sent $4,300 to a user named @Kerrygold The memo line? Consult. Clean version. No ties. At first, it seemed like just another cryptic transaction. But the user behind the account was traced to a man named Malcolm Henders, a freelance script consultant with a prior record of money laundering through independent film companies. He was brought in for questioning. He didn't deny anything. In fact, he laughed. You think I'm the only one who's ever cleaned dirty money through fake screenplays? You should see the A-list names tied up in that game. He didn't name them, but his records were seized. And among them, 3 script proposals, all undated, all incomplete. One titled, The Director Who Knew Too Much. The Ghost Account. The Most Chilling Twist. The FBI traced an offshore account in Belize, listed under Sunstone Holdings, that had funneled $1.3 million into various shell companies linked to Harborview content. That account was opened in 1996, under the name Rob Reiner, Rob's father. But Rob Reiner died in 2020. So who was using the name? More importantly, who had access to that account? The signature on the Sunstone Holdings wire orders? G.R. Hardwick, the same user who authored the fake W-9, and the same person investigators now believe may be Levy's alias. The industry's silent players. Here's what's becoming clearer with each wire trace and subpoenaed document. Hollywood is crawling with shadow deals. Money moves in circles. Fake films. Empty production houses. Fronts for hush money. Some pay to cover affairs. Some pay to settle abuse claims. And some pay to erase people. Quietly. Permanently. Billy Crystal said in his interview. You think it's just lawyers and agents running this place? It's not. It's money. Money that moves in shadows. And now, that shadow had turned its attention toward Rob Reiner, because he had followed the money. And he'd reached the end of the trail. The phone number that shouldn't exist. One last detail. Romy Reiner turned over her father's old iPhone, the one he stopped using publicly in 2022 but kept as a backup. On it was a saved contact. Name: Hardwick, do not call. Phone number: encrypted burner. But briefly active in March, June, and July of 2025. Call log showed Rob dialed it twice. Once for 13 seconds. Once for 41 minutes. And in the notes field, Rob had typed, "This is the end of the money trail. If I die, he's the reason." Closing the loop. So where does that leave us? We now know Nick was paid, indirectly, by a fake production company. The company was funded by offshore accounts linked to Levy's known associates. At least one studio executive is hiding financial connections to the transfers. And Rob Reiner knew all of it. He knew who funded the silence. He knew how the scripts were fake. He knew how truth could be laundered, rewritten, buried. And most damning of all, he knew that the final act was coming. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that he was being recorded in his final hours. Because the Alexa device in the Reiner kitchen picked up a chilling conversation between Rob and a man who doesn't appear on any guest list, and his last words will haunt you. It wasn't just about money. It was about what Rob knew. and what he had proof of. And now, thanks to a forgotten Alexa device, we know what he said in his final hour. Secrets are currency in Hollywood. But Rob Reiner wasn't trying to spend his. He was trying to expose them. For years, people thought he was just another aging director, a relic from the golden age of storytelling. But privately, he had become something else entirely. An archivist. A collector of truths too dangerous to tell. And in his final weeks, that archive became a ticking bomb. One that multiple people, including his own son, may have been coerced to defuse by any means necessary. This is the chapter where everything you thought you knew about Rob Reiner begins to fall apart. The device that never stopped listening. We live in a world of smart homes. Smart lights. Smart locks. Smart speakers. And in the Reiner household, nestled between the family cookbooks and an old iPad, sat a seemingly harmless Amazon Alexa device. Set to ambient music. Used mostly for weather reports and timers. But that night, the night of the murders, it was on. And when Nick entered the house at 3:41 a.m., the device did what it was programmed to do. It listened. What it captured wasn't a scream or a struggle, but a conversation. And it was the last one Rob Reiner ever had. The transcript, 3:44 a.m. 3:46 a.m. The FBI released a partial transcript of the Alexa recording to the investigation team. Some of it is inaudible, but the fragments that remain are chilling. 3:44 and 2 seconds a.m. Rob, I knew you'd come. I figured it would be tonight. 3:44 and 5 seconds a.m. Unidentified male. You left us no choice. 3:44 and 9 seconds a.m. Rob, you think this ends it? You think killing me erases 1995? 3:44 and 17 seconds a.m. Unidentified male. You were warned. You kept the files. 3:44 and 26 seconds a.m. Rob, I had to. For them. For what they did to those kids. 3:44 and 34 seconds a.m. Unidentified male. Then this is on you. 3:44 and 38 seconds a.m. Rob, just leave Michelle out of it. Please. Then a pause. Shuffling. And then 3:45 and 3 seconds a.m. Rob, last audible words. You'll never find the backup. Even if I die, the truth won't. 1 minute later, the device shuts off. Manually. Not by voice. Someone pulled the plug. The Indigo 95 connection. You've seen the phrase Indigo 95 appear more than once now. But what is it? A person? A project? A code? The answer is worse than any of that. It was a program. A covert, elite-led production initiative operated under the guise of a mentorship program for child actors in 1995. Rob was involved briefly, asked to advise, during pre-production of a now-scrapped indie film that never saw the light of day. But something happened on set. Something horrific. Years later, Rob described it, vaguely, in a private email to an anonymous whistleblower. I thought I was being brought in to inspire kids. Instead, I walked into a pipeline. One that fed trauma back into the machine. The lost footage. Investigators believe Rob kept a copy of the footage, despite being told to destroy it. A backup hard drive was rumored to exist. It was never found in the Brentwood estate. But Billy Crystal, when asked directly if Rob ever mentioned a vault drive, said, "He told me if anything ever happened to him, there'd be a silver case under the piano. And that it held everything." No silver case was found. The piano? It had been moved 2 days before the murder. By whom? A man listed as S. Green on the estate's delivery records, but that name doesn't match any verified delivery staff. An alias? A final sweep? The email no one saw coming. 6 hours after the murders, at 9:18 a.m., multiple journalists across LA received a strange and signed email. Subject: If he dies, publish this. Inside was a download link. Encrypted. Password protected. It sat dormant, assumed to be spam, until a tech reporter at The Verge forwarded it to a cybersecurity contact. When decrypted, it contained 47 scanned pages, typewritten, some with handwritten annotations, all allegedly penned by Rob Reiner. The title? The Indigo Ledger. What the Indigo Ledger revealed. Here's what's been confirmed from the leaked document. Descriptions of 12 child actors involved in a 1995 experimental workshop. Notes indicating 3 were allegedly sexually abused by executives tied to now-defunct indie studios. 2 of the executives have since died. 1 is still alive and currently runs a major streaming content division. Rob's notes detail conversations with a woman referred to only as M, believed to be Michelle. He wrote, M says if we go public, they'll use Nick. Use his past, his addictions. She's scared. So am I. The final page reads,